Welcome to The Stacks, a podcast about books and the people who read them. I am your host, Tracy Thomas. Our guest today is executive editor at Sunset Magazine, Hugh Garvey. Hugh has worked as a journalist writing about food, travel, and lifestyle for over 20 years at places like Playboy, Condé Nast Traveler, and Bon Appetit. Today, we talk about food writing and Hugh's start reviewing books at The Village Voice. Here is your weekly reminder. In the show notes, there is a link. That link will take you to all the books discussed today, as well as the social media accounts for The Stacks and our guests. Plus, if you shop through the links on Amazon, you're helping to keep The Stacks free. If you're in need of a book recommendation, send us an email at askingthestacks@gmail.com. Myself and my guest will read it on air and give you a personalized book recommendation. So email askingthestacks@gmail.com with your name, what you're looking for, and maybe a few titles you've loved or hated. If you like The Stacks and want to support the work we're doing, here are a few easy ways you can help. First of all, you can join us on Patreon. You earn perks like our virtual book club and get to connect with other listeners of this podcast. Plus, you get to rest easy knowing your contribution helps to make this show possible. So head over to patreon.com/thestacks to be a part of this fantastic community. I also want to say a huge thank you to Tibby Roten, our newest member of the Stacks Pack. Thank you for supporting the work we do here. The last thing is the easiest. Just subscribe to The Stacks. Leave us a rating and a review. It's super helpful and it's super easy. So please, please, please take a moment to do that. And of course, we always invite you to tell someone you know about the show. Okay, now it's time for my conversation with Hugh Garvey. All right, everybody. I am here today with Hugh Garvey. Hugh is the executive editor at Sunset Magazine. And before that, you could find his work in Playboy and Bon Appetit, among other places. Hugh, welcome to The Stacks.
Thank you. Great to be here.
We're so excited to have you. So that's kind of like a silly professional introduction. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, how you got into food, the food writing world, the writing world? Kind of give us a little background.
Yeah, sure. I'm a 2-decade lifestyle journalist, and I've worked in at many publications, a lot of them based in New York. And, I, like a lot of writers, I studied English in college and wanted to be a writer, and I didn't know in quite what way. So I got a job at a newspaper in New York called The Village Voice. There's no longer with us, but it was at the book review department. So my first job out of college as a newly minted English major was sort of a dream job. I got to read books for a living immediately after having paid to read books. And so that was really, I have to say, I started reading a lot of novels. It was a lot of fiction and, nonfiction. And over the years, I started reading all the cookbooks and learned to cook that way. And so skipping over many magazines, I now edit a lot of food content at Sunset Magazine, where I'm executive editor. And it's something that really started when I was in my early 20s, and books were what led me to develop a skill set and a way of thinking about food that has taken me to this moment. I mean, it still remains like part and parcel of my job.
Right. So you were English major writer, then you started reading cookbooks for fun, or was that also part of the reviewing of the books at the Village Voice?
Well, it's funny. The one thing we didn't do was review cookbooks.
Okay.
So, and it's sort of, I have a complicated history with books. I think a lot of people do. Yeah. And so I'm not unique in that, but mine, I think my story is, a lot of professional and personal adjacency to the book business. And so I kind of saw how the sausage was made from the very beginning. My grandparents had a publishing company.
So cool.
So I grew up looking at manuscripts before I could read, that my grandparents had. One floor of their house was 50% of it was dedicated to books, and therefore it was much like a library, and it even had a card catalog system, I believe. So I grew up, running around, and books were I literally was surrounded by books. My dad was a writer. There were stacks of books everywhere. He was a book reviewer, among many things. And so I don't see books as standalone things. I see them as part of a big system.
Okay.
And I always did. And my first job out of college, well, I had a very romantic notion of what books were when I was in college. And I thought that a writer could just, what writers actually do. But I thought simply books were these fantastic works of either fiction or nonfiction that people somehow conjured, and that if they were good, they were published. And so all you had to do was be a good writer, and then you'd have books.
Yeah.
And you have a book, and you could be you could be a writer.
I see.
And working at the Village Voice quickly in the book review department, where I probably saw 200 books come in a week. We got every book that was published in the United States.
Whew.
And my job was to go through them and divide them into 3 categories. And so in my early 20s, just like this nobody, who could read,
right,
and who they trusted for some reason, got to decide to some degree, at least in that context, the fate of these books.
Right.
So
you quickly realized it wasn't a meritocracy at all.
Exactly. And that I was part of the problem.
Right.
And I really saw that. I was like, my job was to divide them into 3 categories. And it was no, maybe, and yes. And
no meaning no, the book is no good, or no, we won't review
we
this?
won't review it.
Okay.
This is not our book to review.
Okay.
So, we wouldn't. So, Stephen King would go in the no file.
Got it. And that was just based on who the Village Voice was.
Exactly.
The identity of that publication.
And at that point, and so we had it was a section called the Voice Literary Supplement. It was a standalone section. And it very much prided itself on not being the New York Times, not being the New York Review of Books. And it was a fantastic section. It got into, gender politics and identity and Muslim, Islamic fundamentalism and all, it tangled, from the moment of Go with everything that we're now realizing we needed to be tangling with all along. And so it was very ahead of its time, but also very of its time, very Village Voicey. And
so what was in the yes pile? What kind of thing?
What they used to call transgressive fiction, which was like, there are many definitions of it, but it was what people would consider, outsider cultures, voices of, what then were fringe voices, but were voices, people of color, gay and lesbian, writers, and a lot of international fiction that was then published in the States, or a lot of immigrant fiction, so a yes would be, the first anthology of Filipino American writing, like no brainer. Yes,
of course.
Right. Maybe would be first fiction by Iowa Writers Workshop graduate, Z, we've seen this before, but like, are they really great? Or, is there something that we can single out? And, but there was a whole debate. I mean, it's just so funny to think that like, there were 2 camps. It'd be like, is Jeffrey Eugenides like too mainstream? There would be like, or should, they'd be like, is Rick Moody? These guys are it's the boys club, and it's like, but those were great questions to be being asked in the early 90s. So it was fantastic. Long way of saying, I saw a lot of great efforts by a lot of writers go nowhere, at least in our little world. And it was very dispiriting. And when you're like,
because you're a writer.
And you're like, well, wait a second, like, how good do I have to be?
Right.
And you're like, you have to, you kind of have to be really good.
Did it not change because you went in thinking if you're good, your book gets published, the world sees it, you win, you become a famous author. That was kind of like the way that you went into it. And then when you sat there,
like if you're a good doctor, you'll get a job, you'll at a hospital.
But that's how you went into working at the Village Voice. And then you're there and you're separating things into 3 piles. And there, at no point were you not like, oh, it actually doesn't have to do with being good. It has to be the right place. Like I just need to get my book to the right place. Did that come to you or not really?
It eventually did.
But not in the moment.
At first, when I was like this, kid out of college with these massively unrealistic romantic notions, it was really depressing.
It just was like, I'm never going to be.
And so, and I, as a kid, with all these romantic notions, seeing all of these rejections that I was a part of, like I was in some ways rejecting what I wanted to become.
Right.
And it was like, it was sort of my psychological makeup and immaturity at the time. So eventually I evolved to really see, what it took and learned more about the industry. But at that time I was just like, this is just really depressing and I can't read any of this fiction anymore. Like, I'm going to do it for my job, but when I go home, I can't read for pleasure anymore. Right?
Got it.
And so like, well, previous to that job and that experience, I could read for pleasure. I in the evening, I couldn't anymore. But the books that I could read for pleasure were the cookbooks.
Got it.
Because I didn't want to be a cookbook author.
Right.
I didn't want to be a cook. I was like, I wanted to cook. I love food. I always loved food.
You always did.
Yeah, but I was like, these are great. This is just escapist. This is nothing to do with my life. And there was actually a writer, I remember there was a review in the Village Voice of, I believe, a literary memoir or one of the few cookbooks we reviewed, and the reviewer said the great thing about recipes is that every one of them is a story with a happy ending. And that was what those books, what recipes were to me. They were they lifted my mood, and they gave me hope, and I could escape into them, and I could fantasize, and I could read about countries I hadn't been to. In some ways, it reintroduced me to the wonder of reading that I'd lost through this cynical early 20s, look at Sausage Factory.
That's so beautiful. I'm going to cry. I'm like getting emotional over here. It's funny because I think of cookbooks as super not a thing to read.
Okay.
Like in my mind, if I'm like, oh, I'm going to read a book, I'm not like, let me grab a cookbook. I think of cookbooks as a instructional guide. I want to make something. Let me open a cookbook. But I'm like one of those people who skips through a lot of the story part of the cookbook and just go straight to how many cups of flour do I need to make the pie crust, right?
Yes.
So it's so funny to think, because we won't talk about this too much right now, but next week we're talking about Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat. And I read it through like a book start to finish, and I was very moved by it. And so it's just funny to hear you saying that now, because I'm thinking, have I been missing out on cookbooks? I've been doing it wrong, because I like to cook and I like to eat. I love to eat. And I just never thought of cookbooks as being a place to go for reading.
It's they can be, but they don't always have to be. And I think like my relationship with books, and I think all of our relationships with books, I would tend to think that we change what we want to read and how we read. And I think a lot of people might say, all right, I'm really into memoirs right now, or I'm really into first fiction, or I'm really into politics, or I will go between these categories of books. But like I have always, and again, because of, I think, the job that I had and the job, as a book review, junior book review editor and reviewer, and then eventually as an author, the way I read a book changes, and like I am and I feel a little guilty about this, but it makes a lot of sense when I think about it. But I'm a snacker. I snack on books. Like I don't, I don't finish most books that I start, and I used to feel like that was a failing, and that there's still a glimmer of that. I feel like maybe I didn't honor every book, but like, when my first job out of college was to not read 100 books a week. Like it really was. And then you would read the really great one, or the one that held your attention past page 45.
Right.
And that was the one worthy of you sharing your knowledge and enthusiasm of it with your readers, the people who came to the Village Voice. So I changed the way I read, and I changed the way I read cookbooks. So like you said, you're snacking on cookbooks, and I'm snacking, and I continue to snack on fiction. Right. And like, I don't know, I've started 7 books in the past 2 months, and I don't think I've finished one yet, honestly. And it's like, and like, that's okay. And I know a lot of things, and I gain things from it, but like, I'm missing all the endings, and I'll get to the endings, and I maybe don't even need them. Right. I like. Do
you go back? Do you get to the endings? Or no?
I used to more when I not right now. Okay. But that's one of the things that I want to get better at that. My wife is ridiculously completionist in her approach to reading.
Tell me why you guys work well together. You have the balance.
Exactly. But like, I have to say, like, I would read cookbooks start to finish when I was frustrated by and couldn't read first fiction.
And then would you cook from the books, or were you just reading them to read them?
I was mostly reading them to read them.
Okay.
And then I realized, I'm tired of what I'm cooking, and I learned to cook. So eventually, at first it was therapeutic.
Okay.
And then it became practical. And there is one book that I credit as being the most important cookbook to me.
Which one?
And it is called Salsa di Pomodoro, the tomato sauces of Italy.
Oh.
And I'm going to say it's a quote unquote nothing book. It's not a nothing book. It's an everything book to me, but it's not famous.
Right.
And it literally is maybe 50 tomato sauce recipes.
Oh my God.
And all I could afford was I was living in the East Village.
Right.
All I could afford was canned tomatoes and onions. And it's basically cucina povera. It's poor cooking. I was poor, or, I don't. Yeah, I think I was. I think I was technically. I was the lowest paid employee at the Village Voice at the time.
There you
go. The union told me when they wanted me to strike. And it basically was 40 ways of looking at tomato sauce. And so that was, it really was, I learned basic tomato sauce technique. And I realized, oh, wait, you can do one thing 40 ways. And if you caramelize the onions this long, they'll turn super sweet. Or if you chop them really finely, they'll nearly disappear and add that sweetness. Or if you leave them, in rings, they'll become this unctuous other textural level. And so or if you put balsamic vinegar in, it will make it tangier. Or you can enrich it with butter and it becomes, or cream, and it changes into something else. And you can add olives and red chili flakes, and it becomes this aggressive thing. And so it was, that unlocked the function of cookbook.
Wow. Okay. So I want to fast forward a little bit to where you are now.
Mm-hmm.
How did you go from reading novels and things, your job, and then reading cookbooks for joy, and then going into the world of writing and editing and being a part of the food and travel kind of landscape? Because then that switched your joyful reading into your work reading, right?
Yeah. And so there are these pendulum swings. And,
do you still read cookbooks?
Not the way I used to.
That's so funny.
Yeah, it is. So basically I found joy in cooking, and I had something to say, and there's always that thing is they say write what you know, and I always, as a writer and a reader, you think you're supposed to be a certain way. I can't shake that. I'm supposed to be better or different. That's it's human,
yeah.
Right? And I'm not smart enough, or I don't know enough about politics, or I don't know enough about whatever, anything, and don't get me started on the list.
Yeah, I was going to say, if we go down this list, we could be here all day.
But yeah, I was like, oh wow, I really like cooking, and I really like food, and I so this is, and the great thing is, I have to credit the Village Voice. It was this experimental place where they would just let you try things, and I remember I basically was I can write about the way things taste, and I can talk about them, and I think I'm pretty good at this. I remember thinking I think I understand, I'm interested in how something becomes delicious and who's doing what. And I couldn't afford to go to fancy restaurants, but I loved reading restaurant reviews, and I loved, grew up reading the New Yorker's, goings on about town, and just reading the little baby, little micro listings. And I was oh wait, well, that was the fantasy of being a writer. And I think this matches, seriously, it was very juvenile. Yeah. It was oh wait, I can do what I wanted to do as a kid. I can write about restaurants, but I have to tell them, I have to get someone to do it. And hey, they're so I went to the editor of the listing section at the Village Voice, who was literally my age, right? And I was hey, there's stuff going on. I noticed that bars were getting better, and food was showing up at bars, but we already had a restaurant reviewer. And I was cocktails were getting interesting. And I was hey, cocktails are something's going on with cocktails. And there are all these bars that are opening, and they're really interesting and smart. And the cocktails have fresh ingredients. And this is in the early mid 90s. And And I was like, so I think we're going through like this like cocktail renaissance. And like, I don't know why we're not covering this. And she's like, well, you should write about it. And she's like, do you think there's like enough to write about every week? And I was like, yeah, I think so. And she was like, okay, well, do you like, you're our bar columnist. She's like, but I get to do it with you. So we traded every week and we just started writing about bars. And I started writing about like, what's, how people made simple syrup or what fresh limes they used and what the interior of a place looked like. And I was like, I realized I was happy writing. I wasn't getting disappointed with myself for not writing the right fiction. And that was the beginning of how I got into writing about the way things taste and the way, and really like that was, I just started pitching magazines because there wasn't enough space in the Village Voice and editors accepted them because like my ideas were good enough. And I was like, okay, if I can like turn this into like what I do,
right,
it's going to be, I think this could work out and actually can get paid to write.
And it's going to be so delicious.
Well, that too. Yeah. Yeah.
Because you've probably eaten at some of the most amazing places and had the most amazing chefs cook things that you've eaten. Over time, it got to be that. At first, I do cocktails.
I do, exactly.
At first, you were just drunk all the time, but later down the road, I mean, I think that in some ways, especially now with the way that food culture is and celebrity chef and all of that kind of stuff, it kind of seems like the dreamiest dream job ever.
I mean, it was. I was very lucky, and I continue to be lucky. And we all have to remind ourselves of this who work and continue to get to write about how like happy things and delicious things.
Right. It's kind of like nice, fun stuff. I mean, but also food is super political.
It's
in its own right. And and who's cooking and what they're cooking and why they're cooking and where they're like all of those things can be very political. I mean, who obviously comes to mind is Jose Andres because he's like of the moment a very political chef, which is in America, I would say, because there's a lot all over the world. He's not a born American, but he's cooking in America.
Yes.
Do you feel like, I feel like there's a question there. Do you feel like a responsibility to be writing about both the joyful, fun part of cooking and the political stuff?
Yeah, more so than ever. It's, as we know, there's been, people call it a reckoning, and I wish it were a reckoning, but it needs to be more of a reckoning, but Me Too and right. all of the scandals within the restaurant industry and which has changed the way.
Of course. How did I already forget about that?
No, it's I think the weird thing is it became it's one of those things where it's been eclipsed by Trump.
Right, of course.
And unfortunately, that narrative has suppressed the kind of what should be an ongoing and overt conversation, which is still there, but like in how restaurants are run, what goes on. And I know this is not a restaurant show, but
I'm so interested, please.
But the writing and the books, I think what happened with the Mario Batali scandal, and it changed the way I think about those cookbooks that I learned from, and that he wrote.
Right. And so funny. One of my best friends from college in New York worked at one of the Mario Batali restaurants and actually resigned as a waiter. He was just like, I don't need to be a waiter here. Could be a waiter anywhere. I live in New York City. I work at Otto. I could easily work at another Italian restaurant in the Village and have the same commute and be totally fine.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, that's so true, because for most people, I think taking a stand in that way is really hard and you really have to reckon. And I think when it is almost not easy, but easier than we make it out to be, I was really proud of him.
Good for him. Yeah. And I think that is a sort of decision that a lot of editors and writers have had to make too. And I think that restaurant reviewing has become more, absolutely more political, and these sort of assumptions of what what role food plays in the cultural conversation has made food in some ways fraught.
I think just in talking about the politics of food, I think that what's interesting to me is that, and I've never thought about this, I've never articulated it. We'll see how this goes, but food is one of the few arts, like if you think arts and leisure section, that everyone has to consume, right? Like you don't have to go to the ballet. You don't have to read a book. You don't have to watch sports, but you have to eat. And even if you're eating, you know, top ramen, or if you're going to the fanciest restaurant, like there is activism within food for every single person anywhere in the world who's alive, because you have to eat.
Absolutely. And that's an excellent point. And yeah, I think, yes, you're absolutely right that food is it is a political act, whether or not we like to admit it.
Right.
And it's also funny, like I've thought about that, but thinking about it as terms of as one of the arts that we cover,
right?
That plus that is something I haven't thought about before. That like, and that bumps up against something that I was thinking about, that like cookbooks are personal, right?
Yeah.
And recipes are a personal, like someone created a recipe,
right?
Which is in some ways like an algorithm or like a command,
right?
That we then incorporate and execute and then consume.
Right.
Like cookbooks are some of the most intimate, because of the physicalization of the words and then our consumption of that.
Right.
It is in some ways the most intimate reading and consumption loop that there is.
Right. And then if you think you also then, if you have a dinner party and you're feeding other people that thing.
It's like
it's kind of mind blowing.
It's pretty trippy. Like as we're talking about this, I'm like, oh man, this is deep.
I've never thought about food at all in this way, but it is very like mind blowing gesture.
It is. And then I mean, and then get into family and like you're not just, you know, friends. It's like, and then how are you programming your children, or how are you influencing, and then bringing the diners that you are feeding as a, let's say, home cook, into your political act. Like you're making a decision about like, who picked that kale that I'm going to serve to my friend, and my friend's going to have to either eat justice or injustice.
Right. Like, am I serving global warming beef, or am I serving sustainable farm, whatever? In
addition to indentured servitude, you know, sun-dried tomatoes.
So true. I've never thought about what I cook in that way, but now I'm going to be terrified to go to the grocery store. I guess I'm going to have to just go straight to the farmer's market always. Valentine's Day is upon us, and I've got love on the brain. Love for books. Duh, of course. Hello. Did you forget what podcast you're listening to? I love bringing you all great reads, exclusive author interviews, and behind the scenes book gossip. But I can only do that with your support over on Patreon and Substack. Our Stacks Patreon community, also known as the Stacks Pack, is where you can go for book club meetups, a private, very active Discord, and a year-long mega reading challenge to help you achieve all your reading goals. Plus, you also get that monthly bonus episode. Now, over on the Substack, you can subscribe to my newsletter, Unstacked, where I keep the book conversations going. I also give you a healthy dose of sports and pop culture, definitely some hot takes happening over there. And again, that bonus episode. If you don't have a few dollars to spare, don't worry. There are free options on the Substack and the Patreon to get you a little extra Stacks magic. Making this podcast is a total team effort, and by supporting my Patreon and my Substack, you allow me to support my amazing team that makes the show possible every single week. So if you or your friends are looking to meet other book lovers and support this indie podcast, come hang out with me on Patreon, Substack, or both. I would love to have you. And since we're talking about love, you can gift subscriptions to the Patreon and the Substack for that special reader in your life. For the Stacks Pack, head to patreon.com/thestacks. And for the newsletter, head to traceythomas.substack.com. And also, there are links to both in the show notes. Okay, see you in the Stacks. Okay, I think we should transition slightly off food, because I know we're going to spend basically all next week talking about food too. So we have plenty of time to circle back. But I want to talk about your reading. And before we do a little segment here. I'm kind of springing this on you, so don't hate me. But we do a little segment here. It's called Asking the Stacks. A listener has written in for a book recommendation. I'm going to read you what they said.
Okay.
And then I'm going to give some examples of some suggestions, and then you'll give one or two or whatever you come up with. So this comes from Eva. She says, or maybe it's Ava. I don't know. And put it down. I think it's Eva. That's what feels right in my heart. Okay. She says, love the show and hope you can suggest some great books to read. This year, I made a goal to read 15 nonfiction books. So I need just one more book to meet my goal. But I would also love any fiction books to read after meeting my goal. And she says some books that she's loved are Born a Crime by Trevor Noah, Maybe You Should Talk to Someone by Lori Gottlieb, Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. And then some books she's hated are The Testaments by Margaret Atwood and The Girls by Emma Cline. And she said she didn't like those books because they became too, quote unquote, cheap and shallow. So here are my suggestions for you, Eva. The first one I would say is Mountains Beyond Mountains by Tracy Kidder. It's about Paul Farmer. He's a doctor of infectious diseases. It's about his work in Haiti and around the world with AIDS and tuberculosis. And I'm picking this one because it's not quite as fun as Maybe You Should Talk to Someone or Born a Crime, but it is kind of memoir meets real life stuff. Even though it's not a memoir, but it feels like that. So that's my nonfiction pick for you. And then my fiction pick for you is Cutting for Stone by Abraham Verghese. I picked two medical books. It's the story of these twin brothers in Ethiopia whose dad is a famous doctor, and it's like a crazy story, but it's not predictable and it's not very cheap. So I feel like you might like it. Those are my two. Okay, Hugh, what is your book recommendation?
I would recommend The Snow Leopard by Peter Mathiasson.
Okay.
And it was a book that was recommended to me when I asked someone I really need something great to read.
Okay.
And it was written in the 70s, and it's a kind of spiritual travelogue about a guy who goes on a quest with would it be a zoologist who studies animals?
Sure.
Yes. And
a leopardologist.
Yes. And to track and find and study this very rare snow leopard and very elusive animal that lived in Tibet. And it's just about searching and seeing. And it is in the end, you realize, I'm not going to spoil it, but it is a way of this man escaping or dealing with grief. And I'm not going to spoil that turn.
Don't explain.
And it is profound, and I think about it all the time.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, Eva, those are your recommendations. If you read the books, please message us and let us know what you thought. And then for those of you who are looking for book recommendations, email askingthestacks@gmail.com and we'll read your book rec on the air, and we'll give you some random books to read. Okay, now we're going to talk about your reading life, Hugh. 2 books you love and 1 book you hate.
All right, 2 books I love. And it's okay. So basically, there are a lot of books that I've loved that I've forgotten.
Okay.
Right? And then there are some books that I love that I remember, and they're very early books, and they're books that I read. When I say early books, they're books that I read early in my conscious reading life. And these are 2 books that I actually wrote my senior thesis in college about. And they're very, in some ways they were predictive of what would happen in my life, and I didn't realize it then. So they're important to me in a very personal narrative way too. And so, one is, The Day of the Locust by Nathaniel West. I don't know if you've ever read that, but it was written, I believe, in the 20s or 30s, and it's an early, Nathaniel West was a very dystopian Los Angeles-based writer, and it is about the artifice and desperation in Los Angeles in the era that he was living. It's very much about, there's a guy whose name actually is Homer Simpson, randomly, who is obsessed with a young starlet in Los Angeles who's trying to make her way in the world with utter and complete and desperate naivete. And so he's, and it's this unrequited love, and him following her around and not getting what he wants, and her not getting what she wants. And there are drunken parties and Hollywood studio, artifice and cockfights, and it is just
sounds just like LA.
No, but the thing is, like,
nothing's changed.
It is really. It's so tonally accurate today, and it's a very it is the opposite of a happy ending. It's the opposite of what a recipe is.
Great.
And it's fantastic. And I've dipped into it many times since moving here, and just to sort of fact check that things are still the same.
Still the same crazy.
Yeah.
What's your other love book?
The other one is The Big Sleep by Raymond Chandler. And it's again, not dissimilar. It is about complicated love against the backdrop of this city of dreams. And it's also kind of a confusing mess that you can get lost in. And it's tonally it's not nearly as dark as Day of the Locust. But it is, again, I think about like Raymond Chandler and Philip Marlowe. Philip Marlowe, his detective character, embodies observation, and I like books in which you're seeing the seeing, and I think that Raymond Chandler really captures, again, like what Los Angeles feels like, what it smells like, how it dresses itself, how it builds its buildings.
Right.
So you get a crime, not thriller, but you get a whodunit, but you also get just a deeper, like a enriched sense of a place and time.
Amazing. Okay, what's the book you hate?
I've come to hate Catcher in the Rye.
Welcome to the club.
I mean, oh my God.
Truly.
I'm like, can we? I'm just like, it's appalling. When I reread it, I'm like, this is really like, it plays into our worst impulses. I tried to read the big J.D. Salinger. It's an oral history, right? The sprawling biography of him, and I'm just like, why are we so interested in this just abysmal, sex criminal, and who indulges just the worst impulses? And like, I don't mind. I have no problem reading about people doing awful things. The lionization of this character, and then also the ongoing scrutiny and I think strange, like, continued lionization of J.D. Salinger as a quote unquote important thinker. And when you're like, he's a bad guy.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry. Like, we can, like, do we need to write thousands of pages about this guy that we should just dismiss?
Yeah. No,
going
we don't.
forward?
We
Yeah.
don't. It's funny. That book comes up often on the show in either book you love or book you hate.
I just want to know how all those kids who like named their kid Holden and feel.
Yeah. Well, I just think, I mean, I talk about this a lot. I'm a firm believer, and it matters when you read a book, like when in your life you read a book.
Yeah, Selfish Idiot. I read that book when I was
like 16.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you probably liked it then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I read it at like 22. And I was like, this is not, like, I'm too old for it. Like, I already felt too old for it. I was already over it. I feel like if you want to love that book, you have to read it at 16 and never read it again. You can never look back. You just have to hold on to those feelings and trust that you love the book. Because if you read it again as an adult, it's like, ooh.
Yeah.
Anyways, what are you said this earlier that you were reading about 7 books in the last 2 months. What are you currently reading?
I am currently reading The Mosquito Coast by Paul Theroux.
Oh. And
Paul Theroux, again, these are like these 70s, 80s writers. Again, with the dystopia. It's about a guy. I think it was written maybe in the 80s or 90s. It feels very much out of time because it's a guy who is about this sort of genius, misanthropic inventor who's disgusted with what's happened in the United States on every level, and just, the idiocy of the populace, the commercial exploitation of ignorance, and so he takes his family to Central America to, I can't remember exactly where, but somewhere in Central America to kind of start society again in a small scale. And yeah, I don't know, I'm about, 100 pages into it, but he's it's one of those things where I'm like, do I really want to finish this?
I'm just going to ask you, do you think you'll finish?
I think I will. I think I will, because I'm more conscious and a little, I am committed to changing that about my reading.
You are.
Yeah.
It's not just like, this is who I am. And
no, because that's something I want to do more of, just because I want to get better at
finishing.
Yeah. And
finishing what you start.
Yes.
That's so funny.
And I'm reading Running to the Edge by Mark Futterman. It's a book about a running coach in the 70s and 60s who in San Diego, who took a bunch of sort of misfit runners and coached them to a national and eventual, I believe, Olympic level by cracking the code to distance running and speed. And it's, all these things. I'm a novice runner. And he was one of the early proponents and practitioners of interval training, and realizing that the only way to get faster is to go faster, and the only way to run longer is to run longer. But he came up with he sort of stumbled into what became scientifically proven of these things that we all do. I imagine you might have practiced in your own profession, and that I do, that we all take for granted. And he arrived at that with a ragtag team of runners in Southern California. So that's cool to see the underpinnings of how we run. Yeah.
Do you read a lot of things that are California based, or that just happens to be a trend so far?
That's just random. It's a trend so far. It's probably true.
Well, our mutual friend Heather, who was on the podcast, she had a ton of California books because while she was working on her own book, she was trying to read everything that was like ever written in California.
Yes.
So she had a lot of California books. So I wasn't sure if that was an intentional.
It wasn't intentional. This one was just because I've been running more recently, and I wanted to read about running.
Have you read Born to Run?
I have not.
By Chris McDougall?
I have not.
Christopher McDougall. It's the book about running. It's really good. If you're into running, I ran, and then I ran and I trained in New York, and then I ran a race in California, and I got hot and I fainted. And so then I was like, oh my God, I can never run again. And then I read this book and I was like, I can never not run again. And I got back into running.
Oh, that's great.
And I redeemed myself. I ran 3 more half marathons, and I did a marathon, and then I just don't run anymore because I was like, check, I did it. I overcame my fainting, but the book is amazing. Okay. Born to Run. So if you're into running,
I will check it out.
Yeah. It's pretty unputdownable, I feel.
Oh, great.
What are some books that maybe you're looking forward to reading?
A lot of people, including my wife, who recommends a lot of books to me that I end up not reading, but one I think I will, is A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara.
Okay.
If I'm saying that right. And so I've had her, and then recently a colleague of mine told me about how profoundly affecting it was for her.
I need to know if you finish it, because it's so long. It's like 800 pages. This is like, please, if you read it and you finish it, you must email me. Okay. I need to know.
All right.
What's a book or how do you pick your next book?
It's changed. It's recommendations typically
from people
that I know. Yeah. And, often family. It used to be my dad, and before he passed away, and then it was my stepfather-in-law, one of my father-in-laws, who was a big genre crime fan, obsessive collector. Okay. So he got me into a lot of just kind of poppy crime, but that doesn't happen as much anymore because he's not around to recommend those books. But his books are still here, and I'm like, oh, that's right. He has library still here. I'm gonna go raid that. Honor him through borrowing his books.
Yeah. What's the last really good book a person recommended to you?
Cristodoro by Tim Murphy.
Okay.
Do you know this book?
You're going to be surprised. I don't know probably 90% of the books you're going to talk about. So.
And I know, and I probably know 1% of the books that you're going to talk about. There are a lot of them.
There's so many books.
It's insane.
It's impossible to know them all.
Cristodoro by Tim Murphy. It takes place over several decades, or at least 2 decades in, one generation-ish in the East Village, where I used to live. Cristodoro is the name of an apartment building on Tompkins Square Park that was right around the corner from where I lived. And it sort of goes through the AIDS crisis into today, tracking the impact of partially that and a fractured family on a troubled kid who kind of lives through that in this sort of East Village milieu.
Right. What's your ideal reading setup? If you were going to sit down with a book in the most perfect place and read, where are you? When is it? What's going on?
I read at night in bed, as many people do, and that's not my ideal reading. I love it, but I know that that's not the fantasy. Yeah, it's great, and I'm so grateful that I get to when I have the energy and to do it and the opportunity. I love that. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. It's like I think oh, I remember really enjoying reading on this is such a cliche. It's on a hammock and on the under a palapa and in Hawaii, and
sure.
I think there's all this it's that sort of situation. And I just you don't get to do that because you don't go on vacation,
right? Because you don't spend your whole life in a hammock in
exactly. Because I would love for it to be me heading to a book without having worried about anything in advance of it, and then leaving the book not having to worry about what I have to do next. And so it is definitely a vacation situation.
Yeah, when you'd have no
wherever
stress.
That would be. And you know what? I mean, so let's go all the way. In a really nice Airbnb, in the Marais in Paris, just to be totally cliched.
And then you could go eat something basic. Delicious. No, that's great.
Exactly.
One of my best reading moments of life was in Portugal. This resort had tea. It was kind of chilly, and they gave me this blanket, and I was in this outside or this lofted part of this hotel. I don't know. It was so dreamy, and I was reading Americana, and it was just the freaking best.
Oh my gosh.
And I think about
that sounds great. Yeah. Oh no, can I revise it? No, now it's a little chilly.
A little chilly.
Let's
get into
it. So by a peat-fired fireplace on the Dingle Peninsula in Ireland, and my grandparents had a house in Ireland, and which was drafty and cozy, and again, this is time travel, but to that place, but now me and not the kid that I was then.
Are you Irish?
I'm half Irish.
Half Irish
and half Filipino.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. That's
so cool. What a good mix. Okay. Do you have a favorite bookstore?
Yes, I do have a favorite bookstore. And it's in New York, and it's called The Strand, right?
Of course.
And that's my favorite bookstore. And I don't get to go there anymore, because I don't live in New York anymore. But how can you not love?
But when you go to New York, you go. It's just so iconic.
Yeah, I mean and I love Chevalier's on Larchmont.
Yeah, it's a very sweet bookstore. Yeah. That's actually where I got my copy of Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat. What's the last book that made you cry?
Cristodoro by Tim Murphy. Yeah, it's heartbreaking. Yeah.
What's the last book that made you angry?
so much literary fiction.
Yeah. I can relate.
I'm sorry. It's frequently books that people have told me. I have to say, I don't want to insult anyone.
It's not so much. It's more that you're not into the book. Someone recommends it to you, and you're like, this is not that good.
It's books that have been celebrated for being profound, and I see the effort in trying to arrive at the profound.
Okay. We don't have to name names, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
That question often brings up people often ask like, well, what kind of angry? Because sometimes if it's like a nonfiction book, it might be the content of the book makes you angry. Sometimes I feel like Heather's answer had to do with she was angry because she felt she could never write as good as the book that she was talking about. Yeah. And then sometimes people are angry that a book has been hyped up so much and it feels tedious or something.
Yeah, I think, yeah. Sorry to not be able to name
names. That's okay.
There's a whole genre, and it's also, I'm just going to say it's like it's petty anger because it's frustration. This is the same frustration that I felt when I was working at the book review, where I'm like, certain things are going to get rewarded that are not really about like truth. It's just about packaging.
You'll have to tell me off air. What's a book where you felt like you learned a lot?
Pema Chodron's Start Where You Are. It's a Tibetan. I don't know if you've ever read her. No. She's an American-born Tibetan Buddhist, and she gets into a lot of Tibetan Buddhist, mindfulness essentially, and breaks down how we tend to experience thought and feeling, and to some degree time. She doesn't say it, but there's a whole time layer too in the practice that I am just fascinated by, and I am learning about how I respond to things through how she breaks down how we respond to things. To be a little woo woo, but it's. And there are scientific underpinnings to it that I know exist that she doesn't get into. So I'm just learning a lot about mindfulness and Tibetan, sort of poppy Tibetan Buddhism.
I like that. Are there any books that you feel really proud to have read?
Oh my gosh. I would say no. Okay.
Are there any books that you feel embarrassed to have read?
Let me think for a moment. What was that SM book that everyone was into?
50 Shades of Grey.
Yeah. Like, I'm embarrassed that I even tried to read 50 Shades of Grey.
I read all 3. That's always my answer too. I'm like, so embarrassing, but I love them. They were so fun. Vacation read.
Yeah.
What about a book that maybe you're embarrassed that you've still never read?
I've never finished Moby Dick. I know.
Me neither. Join the club. I've also never started Moby Dick. Okay, I do want to talk about this a little bit because you were raised by a writer. Your dad, you said your father was a writer. Your grandparents had a publishing company. You wanted to be, you were an English major. You wanted to be a writer. So what were you reading as a kid? What books in your childhood stick out to you as favorites or meaningful?
Yeah.
Because I'm assuming that's where you found your love of reading was from childhood.
It was, but I really realized like the kind of writer I wanted to be is not the writer I want to be now, which is so. I mean, like I loved all the kind of obvious white men, I mean, again, it's like it's really hard for me to like. I tried to read like F. Scott Fitzgerald again, and I'm just like, no, thank you,
hard pass,
exactly. And I was just like I wanted to do that. And I wanted to write. I think I wanted to write Catcher in the Rye back then. And there were just these like. I actually do think it's a lot about wanting to be something that you feel you're not. I do think a lot of it was wrapped up in identity for me, like being like the not 100% white person, therefore wanting to be the 100% great white American writer.
Because those are like white writers.
Oh my God. Like
ghostly.
in worlds that I did not inhabit. Like it was a very. To me, it really is. A lot of it has been about reading and writing is about, becoming for me. I think I really realized and writing was a way of going and entering and being able to inhabit worlds that I believed I was not supposed to inhabit.
Right.
Regardless of however true that was, or untrue, it's what I felt. And I sort of see a pattern and, and so it's very strange to think now, and I agree, and there's it's a continued evolution about like how you write and what and how much of you put into your writing, and like I don't write a lot of first person stuff that really has to do with who I am. It's what I'm seeing,
right?
Which is, I think,
Right.
Does it make sense that
Yeah.
I'm much more comfortable talking about what I'm seeing than about who I am.
Well, right, because talking about who you are is definitely more vulnerable too. It's
Yeah.
much more personal inside stuff.
Yes.
Okay, I would be wildly remiss if I did not ask you to talk about some cookbooks that stick out as just faves, all-star, maybe a few recommendations of cookbooks that you feel like for people who want to try reading cookbooks like me, who are normally reading recipes but not the actual books parts, like which cookbooks are just the best.
I mean, from a pure understanding of ingredients and how they work, and looking at one ingredient from a bunch of angles, Chez Panisse Vegetables by Alice Waters is required. It talks about what about vegetables when they're in season, what they should taste like at their peak, and then what to do with them. And it just goes. It's almost like it's like, it's just artichoke, asparagus, broccoli,
right.
and it'll be like, and you will come away with a 360 degree understanding of seasonality and multiple approaches to making the most of those vegetables that are in season. That's like essential. And I mean, that's like, I would recommend that above so many. If you Marcella Hazan's The Essentials of Classic Italian Cooking is a fantastic cookbook that is just so obsessive and precise and opinionated, and you really get this. She is a bit of a tyrant, and it's great. And a book that also, and these are not so much personal narrative books, these are more technical, but Tom Colicchio's Think Like a Chef is very much about sort of hacks and principles of cooking, and was very ahead of its time. And it was before he was a TV celebrity chef, but he's the great chef that he is because of what's in this book.
Right. Do you do any reading of food writing that is more narrative as opposed to cookbook? So what pops into my head when I said it's like Michael Pollan or
yes,
those
absolutely,
kind of books.
Yeah, The Omnivore's Dilemma, of course.
So good.
Yeah, so great. This is a weird. I have a complicated relationship with this book now. But Bill Buford's Heat, which was about being inside of the kitchen in the Mario Batali Empire. So it's very interesting now to think. Okay, so he saw all of this cooking. What else did he see? Right. And there is a moment in the book that I remember where Mario Batali is a little kind of abusive to him and a little aggressive and which is not uncommon in kitchens, but it is a moment where you do see a twinge of cruelty it stands out, and you then to put it now in the context of what we all learned since then is to you just realize it was the tip of the iceberg,
right?
But that's a great look inside professional kitchens, but albeit a partial one,
right?
And then Blood, Bones, and Butter by Gabrielle Hamilton, she's a great cook, and that's a beautifully written, very personal memoir about love and the dissolution of a marriage, and starts with one of the most stunningly romantic food memories of a perfect, idealized, and therefore impossible domestic childhood scene that then you never return to in the rest of the book, and that's fantastic.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, last question. I stole this one from the New York Times. If you could recommend one book to the current president of the United States, what would it be?
It would be Start Where You Are by Pema Chodron, because it's about compassion for others and compassion for yourself, and that is something that he lacks. And I believe that he would fail to comprehend and take in the message, because I don't think that even his central processing unit is capable of the empathy and compassion that he is, that this book, I think clearly shows is about the only thing that is just about the most important thing
right.
for a person to relate to other human beings in a functional and useful way. So,
yeah.
But
that's a good recommendation for him. Compassion, compassion, compassion. All right, we're going to get out of here. But before we do, just a reminder, next week, we're going to talk about Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat by Samin Nosrat. And I know you guys are all sitting there like, what the heck? They're going to talk about a cookbook. It's just, trust me, it's going to be magical. I'm super excited about it. There's not spoilers. So if you haven't read the book yet, you don't have to, but let me just say I highly recommend it. And it's so beautiful that if you haven't read the book yet, you should look into the book. Just saying. Hugh, thank you so much for being here today.
You're welcome. It was fantastic being here.
Yay. And we will see you guys in the stacks. Thank you all so much for listening today. And thank you to Hugh Garvey, our amazing guest. We are back next week to discuss Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat by Samin Nosrat. There won't really be spoilers, so feel free to listen even if you haven't read the book yet. Find everything we discussed in today's episode in the link in the show notes. Get your book recommendation read on air by sending an email to askingthestacks@gmail.com. For more from The Stacks, follow us on social media at The Stacks Pod on Instagram and at The Stacks Pod _ on Twitter, and check out the website, thestackspodcast.com. To join the Stacks Pack and get inside access to this show, go to patreon.com/thestacks. Make sure you're subscribed to this show wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're listening through Apple Podcasts, please rate and review this show. Our graphic designer is Robin McCrite, and our theme music is from Tagiragis. This show was created and produced by me, Tracy Thomas.